In 2004, a Harvard student launched a social network from his dorm room. 20 years later, that company is worth more than the gross domestic product of most countries in the world. It does not manufacture anything. It does not extract resources from the ground. It does not transport goods. What it does is collect data on 2 billion people and sell predictions about their behavior. Welcome to the digital economy, where the most valuable product on the planet is something you generate every time you touch a screen. In the previous episode, we saw the institutions that govern the world economy, the IMF, the World Bank, the dollar system. All designed for a world of factories, raw materials, and trade in physical goods. But the 21st century economy runs on something very different. It runs on data, platforms, and networks. And the rules of this new game look nothing like the previous one. To understand the digital economy, you need to understand a concept that changes everything: the network effect. A telephone is useless if only one person has it. With 2 people, there is one possible connection. With 10, 45. With 1,000, nearly 500,000. Each additional user does not just benefit themselves, they make the network more valuable for everyone else. This principle, formally described by the engineer Robert Metcalfe in the 1980s, explains why the digital economy naturally tends toward monopoly. Think of a traditional market. If a shoe shop is good, it can grow, but there are physical limits: space, suppliers, competition from the shop next door. In the digital economy, those limits disappear. A platform connecting buyers and sellers becomes more attractive the more participants it has. And the more attractive it is, the more participants it draws. It is a virtuous circle for whoever leads and an impassable wall for whoever tries to compete. Economists call these winner-take-all markets. Amazon started selling books in 1995. Today it controls approximately 40% of e-commerce in the United States. Google processes more than 90% of internet searches globally. Meta owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Between the 3 platforms, they cover the digital communication of an enormous proportion of humanity. They are not monopolies in the traditional sense. Nobody forces you to use Google. But when everyone uses it, not using it has a cost. And that, in practice, functions in a very similar way. Now comes the part that changes the rules of the economic game. In the industrial economy, companies manufactured products and sold them to consumers. The transaction was clear: you paid, they delivered. In the digital economy, many services appear to be free. You do not pay to use Google, or Facebook, or Instagram. But they are not free. You pay with your data. Every search you make, every link you click, every photo you upload, every second you spend watching a video before scrolling to the next one generates information. That information is collected, analyzed, and turned into extraordinarily detailed behavioral profiles. And those profiles are sold to advertisers who want to show you exactly the product you are most likely to buy at that precise moment. Professor Shoshana Zuboff of Harvard University coined a term to describe this model: surveillance capitalism. In her 2019 book, Zuboff argues that we are facing a new economic logic. Companies no longer just sell products or services. They extract data from human behavior, process it through algorithms, and convert it into predictions that are traded in what she calls behavioral futures markets. The phrase that best sums it up is devastating: if you are not paying for the product, you are the product. But even that falls short. Zuboff argues that you are not just the raw material. You are also the target. Algorithms do not merely predict your behavior. They try to modify it. Every notification designed to bring you back to the app, every infinite scroll, every recommendation that takes you from one video to a slightly more extreme one is a behavioral modification mechanism. Digital platforms are not just intermediaries. They are complete markets that set the rules, charge commissions, and control access. Amazon does not just sell products. It provides the infrastructure where millions of sellers offer theirs. And at the same time, Amazon is both seller and referee. It decides which products appear first, which sellers get more visibility, and in many cases launches its own versions of the best-selling products on its platform. Google does not just search for information. It decides which information you see first. And that decision can make or break entire businesses. Apple and Google control the only 2 relevant mobile operating systems. Any company that wants to reach consumers through an app needs their permission and must pay their commission, which typically runs around 30%. It is as if a medieval market were run by a single feudal lord who also happened to be the largest merchant in the market, charged rent to every stall, and could expel whomever he wished without explanation. The digital economy has also transformed work. And this is where promises of freedom and flexibility collide with a more complicated reality. The so-called gig economy turns jobs that used to be stable employment into a series of one-off tasks managed by an app. Uber does not employ its drivers. Deliveroo does not employ its couriers. They are, legally, self-employed. That means they have no paid holidays, no sick leave, and no social security contributions in many countries. The promise was freedom: work when you want, be your own boss. And for some people, that works. But the data tell a more nuanced story. A Human Rights Watch study on platform workers in Texas found that, after deducting expenses, the median wage was $5.12 per hour, including tips. That is 30% below the federal minimum wage in the United States. Meanwhile, in 2024, Uber reported revenues of nearly $44 billion and a net profit close to $10 billion. The European Union has tried to regulate this situation with directives requiring platforms to recognize labor rights. Spain passed the Rider Law in 2021. The debate is far from over. Europe has led the attempts to regulate the digital economy. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, came into force in 2018 and established for the first time clear rights over personal data: the right to know what data is collected, to request its deletion, and not to be subject to automated decisions without human oversight. The Digital Markets Act of 2022 went a step further. It aims to limit the power of large platforms by requiring them to allow interoperability, prohibiting certain self-preferencing practices, and demanding transparency in algorithms. The United States has taken a different approach, more based on case-by-case antitrust litigation. China has oscillated between encouraging its tech giants and cracking down on them when they accumulate too much power. There is no global consensus. And that lack of consensus is, in itself, part of the problem. Because platforms operate globally, but regulations are national. The digital economy has created a paradox. We have access to more information, more products, and more services than at any point in history. And at the same time, a handful of companies knows more about us than any government has ever known about its citizens. For a small business owner, the digital economy can mean access to a global market. But it can also mean complete dependence on a platform that can change the rules at any moment. For a worker, it can mean flexibility. But it can also mean precarity, unpredictable income, and no safety net. For a citizen, it can mean information at your fingertips. But it can also mean algorithmic manipulation, information bubbles, and a slow erosion of privacy. The question the digital economy forces us to ask is not technical. It is profoundly social. Who really benefits from this model? And who pays the price? First idea: network effects make the digital economy naturally tend toward monopoly. The more users a platform has, the harder it is to compete with it. Second idea: personal data has become the most valuable raw material in the economy. Surveillance capitalism extracts it, processes it, and converts it into predictions that are sold. Third idea: the gig economy has transformed work, promising flexibility but generating, in many cases, precarity. Regulation lags behind technology, and there is no global consensus on how to address these challenges. The digital economy transformed how we buy, sell, and work. But it also created something even more radical: a new type of money that needs no banks and no governments. In 2009, someone published a 9-page document under a pseudonym. And the concept of money began to change forever. Or so some said. Next time, crypto and digital money.